Hi everyone and welcome to a new video. Now, as you can see by the title, this is sort of a 5 reasons why ... type of video. Not sort of, it's literally that. But I will be talking about this book right here, and that's Agnes by Peter Stamm. Now, if you have spent any amount of time on this channel, you probably know that this book is my favorite book of all time. I talk about it quite a bit, I mention it quite a bit, and I just recently reread this book for the first time. I am not massively into rereading, that's why it took me so long, but I want to get better with that, and what better place to start than my favorite book. It's not that I never reread. I reread Eat, Pray, Love last year, but those are more the books that I read in my early teens and sort of want to reread, or books I read for school and stuff like that. But this is like the first time I'm rereading a book that I actually read in my free time, or you know what I mean. And spoiler alert, I still love it. It's still my favorite book of all time. And I noticed a few things that could easily explain why I love this book so much. I struggled previously to sort of formulate my thoughts on why it is that I love it so much, and now today I gathered 5 reasons why that is so. And I think this reread also really helped me with that struggle I talked about in a previous video of how I'm scared to read my favorite author, which is Peter Stamm, because now it's not that thing I read a while ago. It's sort of not that I don't like it as much as I said, I still like it just as much as I did the first time around, if not more. But it's not on that pedestal far away, and I don't really have the ability to grab why it is my favorite. It's more closer to me now, and I think that will help with continuing reading his other works. But long story short, what is this book about? Now we have our main narrator, and he is in Chicago. He is a non-fiction writer, and one day he meets Agnes in the Chicago Public Library, I think it's what it's called, yes. And sort of they make eye contact and develop some sort of relationship, and they start talking, and from that it grows into an actual relationship, and we sort of see that evolve as our narrator also starts writing a story about Agnes, and we see what happens when reality and fiction starts to blur. That's like the one thing I say when I don't want to give too much away about this book, is it is about the fact or like seeing what happens when fiction and reality start to blur. So now with this one, it is about that, like with talking about fiction and reality starting to blur. But, and that's my first point, there are so many themes in this book, and I wrote down a list of those in my Goodreads review, and I will just quickly read them to you. I'm putting the book down and I will get back to all of those later on, but first I will read them to you. So themes that I noticed being touched upon in this book is coldness and the feeling of being trapped, trying to relive past moments, but realizing that memories are always just a copy of life, emptiness and trying to give life meaning by capturing it, also the sense of anonymity and the feeling of being alone amongst people, the sort of topic of longing for death versus fear of death, then also the fear of being forgotten and trying to leave something behind so you are going to be remembered, the asymmetry of being human and how we see ourselves versus how others see us, and of course again the big one, fiction versus reality, and how those two things sort of blur together. Now what I like about that is that there's always certain scenes that cover those themes and topics, but it could also be just generally the answer to what is this book about. And I feel like that mechanism of a scene focusing on that theme while also being a theme that is reoccurring throughout the whole story. And I think that sort of structure is really, really well made. Now my second point is the fact that both characters and the side characters are both unreliable in some way and also unlikable. And this is probably where that whole thing of me liking books that actually I don't really like the main characters started, I guess. Both of those characters, the main ones we focus on, are unreliable. And with that whole situation, it opens up so many theories where that story is actually going and what it actually means. I will get into that a little bit with my next point, but with that one, it is so prevalent in this book that you don't have to enjoy a character to enjoy a story. And I think it's the first book that made me realize that, and I'm very glad I got that literary revelation. So that's another reason I really like it. And again, the third reason is that whole spiel with like the ending in comparison also to the start and to that whole thing I mentioned about unreliable narrators or characters in general. We have the very famous line, very famous, I mean by, I always mention it when I talk about the book, right at the beginning, that says, I'm going to read it in German first and then I will translate it. Agnes ist tot, eine Geschichte hat sie getötet. Which translates into Agnes is dead, killed by a story. And so you sort of think you know what will happen at the end, but it is not exactly what is happening, or is it? The ending is not very clear, and I don't think it's a spoiler because I'm not going to say what it is, but it's not very clear what is actually happening at the end. And that relationship of a very clear and factual start and that ambiguous ending just really worked for me also the first time around. But this time around, I had one theory. I will not go into those theories now because those might spoil your experience. So if you have read the book, you can let me know in the comment section, and we can discuss that somewhere else. But I had one theory of what was actually going on. Upon rereading, I discovered multiple hints towards what also could have happened, especially in regards to those unreliable characters, and I think that's super fascinating. Now, my fourth reason is, I said before that I really like to see the mechanism at play when a relationship is sort of falling apart. And this book is the perfect example of that. You as a reader pick up on things that right from the start that those two characters don't pick up on, because they are in a relationship with each other, and you don't see the same thing when you're in it as when you are outside of it. And to see that, it's like almost you saw a train wreck coming and there was no chance of intervening to solve it, but you knew exactly what should have been done to solve it. And that feeling of watching it getting destroyed while not being able to intervene with it is just something I found extremely powerful if you can pull that off. And I think Peter Stam really did an amazing job at that. What I also, and that's the one big thing I noticed this time around, like not really my first read, but that's because it is my first read of a Peter Stam novel back then. Now I read a bit more and I know a bit more about him. I read his newest novel that is sort of a play or a reaction to Agnes, and those meta moments, those moments that correlate with Peter Stam's own life, with other novels. There was like a brief mention of a title, like not directly the title of that book and talking about that book, but in a description of a landscape it was briefly mentioned, or like just little hints, little meta moments with his other works and with his own life and with his own story. And I found that so fascinating, and I think that's the big benefit of reading or rereading, especially to pick up on those clues if you look at the author and the bigger picture of his work. Now, this is 5 reasons why I love it, why I love Agnes so much. There could be more, I'm sure, but I wanted to narrow it down to 5. And if that is not convincing enough, I will surely convince you in the comment section if you leave me a comment. And I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I will see you soon for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.